Big statement coming out of Iran. Iran says all American bases are in our grasp. U.S. base in Bahrain has been hit by Iranian missiles. Kuwait has been targeted. United Arab Emirates. Apparently, there's been an interception. Iran says all U.S. bases are within our reach. The missiles did not stop at Israel's borders. That is the sentence that changes everything about what happened on February 28, 2026. When Iran launched its retaliatory ballistic missile campaign following the American and Israeli opening strikes on Thrawn, the world expected Iran to fire at Israel. It expected the Houthis in Yemen to fire at Israel. It expected the IRGC to launch its long-promised crushing response at the country that had just bombed its presidential compound and its supreme leader's office district. What the world did not expect, or what it perhaps should have expected but hoped it would not see, was Iran simultaneously firing ballistic missiles at the sovereign territory of Qatar, at the sovereign territory of the United Arab Emirates, at Bahrain, at Kuwait, at American military bases embedded inside countries that are not combatants in this war, countries that have no military alliance with Israel, countries that, in some cases, are actively hosting American diplomatic personnel engaged in the very negotiations that Iran itself claims it wanted to succeed. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps confirmed it publicly and without apology. In a statement released through FAR's news agency, the IRGC announced that it had targeted 4 American military installations across the Gulf simultaneously. Al Wadeh Air Base in Qatar, the largest American military installation in the entire Middle East. Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates, the critical U.S. Air Force hub housing approximately 3,000 American service personnel. Al Suwait and the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, the nerve center of American naval power across the entire Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, the Red Sea, and the Gulf of Oman. 4 countries, 4 American bases, 1 coordinated salvo launched simultaneously with a ballistic missile barrage aimed at Israeli population centers. This is the most significant expansion of the Iran-Israel war since the conflict began. And to understand why, you have to understand exactly what Qatar and the UAE are, what they represent to Iran, and why striking them on this morning crosses a threshold that no amount of military framing can fully rationalize. Let me begin with Qatar because Qatar is the country where the full absurdity of this moment is most concentrated. Al Wadeh Air Base sits southwest of the Qatari capital, Doha. It is not a small installation. It is the forward headquarters of United States Central Command, CENTCOM, the combatant command that oversees all American military operations across the Middle East. It hosts the Air Operations Center that coordinates all U.S. air power in the region. It houses F-15 fighters, tanker aircraft, surveillance planes, and the logistics infrastructure that makes American military power projection in the Middle East possible. At any given moment, there are between 10,000 and 12,000 American military personnel at Al Uwaid. It is in every meaningful strategic sense the brain of the American military machine in the region. Qatar hosts aloud, and Qatar simultaneously is the country that has spent the past several weeks hosting the diplomatic back channel that American Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi have used to negotiate across. Qatar hosts American military power on the largest scale anywhere in the Middle East, and Qatar has been simultaneously one of the few Arab states maintaining civil and functional relationships with Iran at the diplomatic level. Qatar is not a combatant in this conflict. Qatar has no military agreement with Israel. Qatar has not participated in any strike on Iran. Qatar has been hosting the conversations that both sides claimed they wanted to have, and Iran fired ballistic missiles at Qatari soil. Anyway, the Qatar Defense Ministry confirmed what happened with a statement that was simultaneously defiant and diplomatic. Quote, "The Ministry of Defense confirms that the threat was dealt with immediately upon detection in accordance with the pre-approved security plan and that all missiles were intercepted before reaching Qatari territory. Qatar's Patriot missile defense batteries operated in coordination with American forces, intercepted the incoming Iranian missiles. The intercept worked. The missiles did not reach their physical targets. But here is what the intercept did not neutralize. The Qatari Foreign Ministry then released a second statement, one that carried language that Qatar does not use lightly toward any country. The state of Qatar, the statement read, strongly condemns the attack that targeted Al Uwaid Air Base by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. We consider this a flagrant violation of the sovereignty of the state of Qatar, its airspace, international law, and the United Nations Charter." And then the sentence that defines what comes next. "We affirm that Qatar reserves the right to respond directly in a manner equivalent with the nature and scale of this brazen aggression in line with international law. Qatar is threatening Iran directly." Qatar, which maintains full diplomatic relations with Iran, which hosts Hamas political leadership, which has maintained neutrality as a mediating state through multiple rounds of this conflict, is now formally reserving the right to respond to Iran's attack. That is not diplomatic boilerplate. That is a statement of intent drafted in the immediate aftermath of ballistic missiles entering Qatari airspace. Now let me walk you through the United Arab Emirates, because the UAE situation carries its own distinct dimension. Explosions were reported in Abu Dhabi, the UAE capital, confirmed by AFP correspondents on the ground. Explosions were then separately reported in Dubai. Multiple reports from residents across Abu Dhabi and Dubai heard the detonations, and video of UAE air defense interceptors firing appeared on social media almost immediately. Iran's IRGC confirmed it had targeted Al Dhafra Air Base located south of Abu Dhabi. Al Dhafra is home to the United States Air Force's 380th Air Expeditionary Wing. It houses fighters, strike aircraft, reconnaissance platforms, drone systems, tanker aircraft, and fuel and ammunition depots. It is a critical American air power hub, and it is co-located with and shared by the UAE Air Force. The United Arab Emirates closed its airspace. Not a partial closure, not a temporary rerouting announcement, but an immediate emergency airspace shutdown across the country, described by UAE authorities as a temporary and partial closure as an exceptional precautionary measure amid regional security concerns. The U.S. Embassy in Abu Dhabi issued an emergency shelter-in-place directive for all embassy staff. The U.S. consulate in Dubai issued the same order for all consulate personnel. American citizens across the UAE were formally warned by embassy communications to find secure locations, maintain supplies of food, water, and medication, keep phones charged, and monitor local media. What this means in practice is that the United Arab Emirates, one of the most economically consequential countries in the Middle East, a country with a $420 billion annual GDP, a country that hosts the world's busiest international airport in Dubai, a country that processes trillions of dollars of global trade flows annually, was in emergency lockdown. Air Arabia canceled all flights to Iran, Iraq, and affected regional routes. Fly Dubai canceled flights to Thrawn, Mashhad, and Tel Aviv. Hamad International Airport, one of the busiest transit hubs in the world, diverted and canceled flights as Qatari airspace was placed under effective combat conditions. Let me be precise about what Iran did this morning, because the precision matters. Iran did not accidentally fire missiles toward Qatar and the UAE while targeting something else. The IRGC announced the specific targets by name: Al-Udaid, Al Dhafra, Al Salem, the Fifth Fleet. These are not mistakes in targeting data. These are deliberate selections from an IRGC target list that was developed over years of contingency planning for exactly this scenario. Iran looked at the map of American military bases across the Gulf and systematically assigned ballistic missiles to each one. And there is a critical difference between what Iran did this morning and what Iran did in June 2025, the last time Iranian missiles headed toward Gulf Arab territory. In June, when Iran fired at Al-Udaid in retaliation for American strikes on its nuclear facilities, Iran gave advanced warning to Qatar before the missiles launched. Washington, London, and even Beijing were notified in advance, which is why Qatar closed its airspace before the missiles arrived. Why American personnel at Al-Udaid had time to shelter in hardened facilities, why the base had dispersed its aircraft in the hours before impact, and why, despite 6 IRGC missiles claiming to have struck the base, casualties were 0 and damage was limited to a communications dome. Iran warned Qatar last June. Iran gave everyone an off-ramp. Iran choreographed its retaliation to maximize political messaging while minimizing physical casualties. The Institute for the Study of War analyzed the June strike and concluded explicitly that Iran had choreographed it to minimize tensions. This morning, there was no advanced warning to Qatar, no notification to the UAE, no message delivered through diplomatic channels that missiles were 30 minutes out so personnel could take cover. When the U.S. Embassy in Qatar sent its emergency alert to Americans in the country at 0600 hours local time, the message was not a structured diplomatic notification with time to respond. It read, "Missile incoming, imminent missile strikes. Duck and cover until further notice. Continue to shelter in place." Duck and cover. That is crisis communication issued seconds or minutes before impact, not hours before impact. That is not Iran giving Qatar an off-ramp. That is Iran firing without warning, and the American embassy scrambling to get its people into shelter before the warheads arrive. That distinction, warned in June versus not warned in February, tells you exactly what Iran's strategic posture has shifted to between those two moments. Bayam Ben Taliblau, senior director of the Iran program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, told Stars and Stripes on February 23rd, 5 days before today's strikes, that Iran had been signaling a fundamental change in its approach to retaliation. His exact words, "I think now we're moving towards a world in which the regime is at least publicly signaling that it will be fighting in a much less constrained manner than before." Much less constrained, no advanced warning, missiles over Doha, smoke rising over Abu Dhabi, explosions reported in Dubai. Ben Taliblau made that assessment 5 days ago. This morning, he was proven correct. Now let me explain the Bahrain dimension, because Bahrain is where the physical damage appears to be most concrete and most significant at this hour. The U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters is located in the Jaffer district of Manama, the Bahraini capital. The Fifth Fleet is not a symbolic installation. It is the operational command for all United States naval forces in the Gulf, the Arabian Sea, the Red Sea, and parts of the Indian Ocean. It coordinates the carrier strike groups, the guided missile destroyers, the submarine assets, and the maritime patrol aircraft operating across that entire expanse of water. If you want to understand American power projection against Iran, the Fifth Fleet headquarters is the operational brain. Iran's Tasnim news agency and Fars news agency both confirmed that the Fifth Fleet base in Bahrain was struck. The Bahrain news agency confirmed it. Reuters correspondents reported seeing smoke rising from the Jufair area where the base is located. Video circulated on social media showing what appeared to be an impact and subsequent fire at the facility. CNN confirmed a U.S. official described the situation at the Bahrain base as an active situation, which is American military communications language for an ongoing emergency requiring a response. Bahrain's Interior Ministry, after confirming the strike, issued an emergency public directive urging citizens and residents to remain calm and head to the nearest safe place after sirens were activated across the country. The ministry additionally urged the public to use main roads only when necessary to maintain public safety and allow authorities to operate efficiently. The Fifth Fleet headquarters being struck by Iranian ballistic missiles is not a marginal event. It is an attack on the command infrastructure that directs American military operations across an entire theater of war. It is Iran telling the United States not just that it can hit Israel, and not just that it can fire missiles into Saudi airspace where there were reports of explosions in Riyadh as well, but that it can reach inside Bahrain and put munitions on the building from which America directs its naval power in the Persian Gulf. Now let me place all 4 of these strikes, Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, and Kuwait, into the strategic frame that explains why Iran made this choice in the opening hours of today's operation, when it was already absorbing devastating American and Israeli strikes across Thran, Isfahan, KM, Karaj, and its naval bases. The IRGC's logic here is documented in its own public statements from the past several months. The IRGC has repeatedly described American military bases in the Gulf as vulnerabilities, not strengths. Its framing has been consistent. Yes, there are 30,000 American service personnel at bases across Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and the UAE. But those bases are not inside the continental United States. They are inside small Gulf Arab states with civilian populations. They are connected to the Gulf through global shipping lanes that run through the Strait of Hormuz. They require resupply. They require fuel and parts and logistics. And Iran's short-range and medium-range ballistic missile arsenal was designed over 3 decades to hold exactly these targets at risk. The IRGC message this morning, delivered not in a statement but in the act of firing, was, "You struck our capital, you struck our supreme leader compound, you struck our naval bases and ports, and in return we have shown every Gulf Arab state that hosts your military power that they are inside our range and inside our targeting solution." The question every leader in Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, Doha, Manama, and Kuwait City is asking right now is whether continuing to host American military forces is worth becoming a target in a war that is not their war. That is Iran's true strategic objective in striking Qatar and the UAE this morning. It is not to destroy Al-Udeid. A single ballistic missile barrage, however impressive, will not put Al-Udeid out of operational commission. The base has hardened aircraft shelters, dispersal protocols, redundant communications, and the most capable short-range air defense system on Earth in the American Patriot. Iran knows this. Iran knew in June that its missiles would be intercepted. And Iran struck Al-Udeid again this morning anyway, because the strike is not the message. The strike is the delivery mechanism for the message. And the message is this: every Arab government in the Gulf is now inside a war it did not choose. And every one of them will have to decide what relationship it wants with the country doing the striking. Qatar today is simultaneously the country that intercepted all Iranian missiles over its territory and condemned Iran's attack as a violation of its sovereignty, and a country that still hosts the political bureau of Hamas and the back-channel diplomatic infrastructure that both Iran and the United States have used to communicate. How Qatar manages those contradictions in the next 48 hours will define the country's foreign policy posture for a generation. The UAE today is a country where explosions were heard in both Abu Dhabi and Dubai, whose airspace is closed, whose citizens are sheltering in place, and whose economy, built on the premise of being a stable neutral hub in a volatile region, has just absorbed a signal that the stability premium it has marketed to the world for 30 years is not guaranteed. The UAE-Israel normalization agreement signed in the Abraham Accords of 2020 has just become significantly more expensive in Iranian terms. Here is what the next 12 hours will reveal about whether these Gulf strikes represent Iran's full retaliation posture or merely the opening round. Watch the volume of Gulf strikes in the coming hours. If Iran launches a second wave toward Al-Uwaida, Al-Afra, or the Fifth Fleet Base, it signals that degrading American forward-basing infrastructure is a sustained campaign objective, not a one-time statement. If the Gulf strikes stop after this initial wave, it suggests Iran delivered its political message, demonstrated its reach, and is now calibrating whether to escalate further or allow diplomatic channels to open. Watch for any communication from Bahrain about the Fifth Fleet's operational status. The base was struck, smoke was seen rising. The active situation language from a U.S. official means the damage assessment is ongoing. If the Fifth Fleet headquarters report significant damage to command and control infrastructure, it changes the operational picture of the American campaign against Iran in ways that have nothing to do with the number of strikes and everything to do with the ability to coordinate them. Watch the Gulf Cooperation Council. The Arab League's Arab Parliament has already, in context of the June 2025 strikes, condemned Iranian attacks on Qatar as a flagrant and unacceptable violation of Qatari sovereignty. The GCC Secretary General has already expressed surprise at Iranian missile strikes on a fellow Gulf state. With Iran now having struck 3 separate GCC member states on a single morning, the pressure on those governments to formally coordinate a response or to formally demand that Iran cease will be immense. And watch above all for whether the Gulf Arab states quietly request that American forces increase their operational tempo from their bases or quietly request the opposite. Because the IRGC's bet this morning is that at least one Gulf government, under the pressure of being a battlefield it did not choose, will blink, will begin to limit what American forces can do from its soil, will pass word through back channels that while it cannot formally ask the Americans to leave, it would appreciate a reduction in the scale of offensive operations launched from its territory. That calculation, the calculation that American forward bases are a political liability for the host governments under Iranian missile fire, is the same calculation Iran made in June 2025. It failed in June. The Gulf states absorbed the strikes, condemned Iran, and maintained their hosting arrangements. But in June, Iran gave advanced warning. Iran choreographed the strikes to minimize impact. Iran left every government a clean off-ramp. This morning, Iran fired without warning over Doha, over Abu Dhabi, over Dubai, and smoke is rising above the building where American admirals direct the naval forces that are right now, at this exact moment, coordinating strikes on Iran from 2 carrier strike groups in the Arabian Sea and the Mediterranean. The missiles Iran fired this morning toward Qatar and the UAE were ballistic, but the trajectory they describe is not physical, it is political. And where that trajectory lands, which governments hold their nerve and which begin to recalculate the price of hosting American power in a war without boundaries, is the question that will shape this conflict for months to come. No red lines. Iran said it this morning through its own foreign ministry. After what the United States and Israel did to Thrawn, to its leadership compound, to its naval bases, to its nuclear infrastructure, there are no red lines remaining. Qatar found out what no red lines means this morning. The United Arab Emirates found out what no red lines means this morning. Bahrain found out what no red lines means this morning. And the world is watching to see which country finds out next. Subscribe now and turn on every notification. The Gulf is now a battlefield, and I will be here for every development.